Subcommittee, mic check. 1, 2, member mic check. Member mic check. 1, 2.
Test, member. Oh. Test, member.
Because of the cameras outside, right? Yeah. Yeah, but when you look at it on YouTube, it's ugly. Yeah. Like somebody, has home video. No, there's LEDs. All the rooms, all the new rooms, LEDs. No, tell him this. No, okay, there's LEDs, not anything else. Yeah, okay. How you doing? Good. Good to see you. That will change.
How are you?
I'm good. How you doing? Good to see you. Not too bad. That's why you talking.
Still not tall enough.
Hey, sir, I'm doing great. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Wrong place to try to get through.
Good.
Good. How you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. No, good.
Hey, man, I don't know whether you're fist bumping or shaking or whatever. I'll do whatever you want to do. I don't care.
I'm old, so I forget things like that.
It was really good
Good
to
to
see
see
you a
you.
little while ago, okay? I'm glad you went down with us. And you had a good trip last week as well,
Wonderful,
right?
great,
I saw
absolutely.
some really good pictures of you. You were in a helicopter, and you were out on a boat,
Yep.
and Kim said you had a really good day.
It was a
So
very good day, yeah. It was fast, but it was really good.
well, we got a lot out of your trip down in Florida. My guys really enjoyed seeing you down
Good.
there. So it's kind of nice to, I always say it's nice to get muddy boots and get out on the ground, you know?
It is,
So it's
yeah.
enjoyable.
Know what y'all are going through.
Well, we look forward to, anything we can do for you today, let us know, okay?
I'll do it. Thank
Thanks,
you.
man.
Very well. You need anything else? You okay? Coffee or anything?
I saw some great pictures of you with the secretary the other day. You're on a helicopter, and you're out on a boat. You look like you had a great time. I'm glad Kim took care of you pretty well, so that's good. Richard, stay away. I'm watching you. You're okay.
The subcommittee will please come to order. We are here today to discuss the fiscal year 2021 budget request for the Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today, and I want to extend a special thank you to General Semih Knight, whose term as Chief of Engineers and Commanding General of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will end in May. That's both good news and bad news. On behalf of our subcommittee, I would like to thank you, General, for your service, your fine service to our country, and for all you've done for the Corps in your important role. You have demonstrated an unwavering dedication to addressing our nation's water resources, its needs during a challenging period of environmental reset due to climate change. Thank you for all the disasters you've helped us avoid and for those that you have helped to clean up. Last year, we faced similar circumstances. Your agencies were under pressure from significant flooding in the Midwest and drought in the West. Again today, Mississippians across that state are still drying out. From the Pearl River flood, 45% of western states are experiencing some form of drought. The Great Lakes are at an all-time high, and precipitation and snowpack have been below average in California so far in 2020. Climate change is accelerating, and communities are caught in the crosshairs. Though the water resource needs of our country vary from region to region, there's a constant and essential need to invest in our infrastructure. Without significant investment in our infrastructure, the dichotomy of water surpluses in the Middle Belt and water shortages in the West nonetheless threatens Americans from all walks of life. Although Congress last year rejected the administration's proposed deep cuts, the Trump administration has once again proposed to slash funding for the Corps and Bureau of Reclamation, this time by 22% and 32% respectively. When will the White House learn their proposal is flawed and dangerous to our people and our communities? These proposed cuts are greatly disappointing to this subcommittee and to our colleagues from both parties. These cuts are divorced from reality. We all know our water resource infrastructure impacts the life and safety of our citizens, as well as America's economic prosperity. I am particularly incensed about this administration's lack of attention to the needs of the people of the Great Lakes region. Yes, the administration has prioritized the SULOCs, and a broad bipartisan coalition in this House is thankful. However, the economic and environmental threat that the Asian bighead carp pose to the Great Lakes, a multi-billion-dollar fishery, and the economic lifeblood of millions of Americans is just as great as the threat of failure of the SULOCs. The continually rising lake level across the Great Lakes threatens millions more people, ports, and communities, and adds to the threat of the Asian bighead carp sweeping into the Great Lakes. Yet this administration has ignored clear congressional intent by refusing to fund the next phase of work for the Brandon Road and Dam, and by refusing to begin a Great Lakes coastal resiliency study. Worst of all, President Trump reneged on his word. He made a promise to the Great Lakes at a recent Michigan rally that he would move swiftly and stop Asian bighead carp. But as we have learned, he can be full of empty promises, and when the cameras were turned off, he overruled the Army Corps and stopped the Brandon Road project dead in its tracks. But this subcommittee, will persevere. Despite these proposed cuts, rest assured that there is bipartisan support in Congress for the work that your agencies undertake on behalf of the American people. Do not be deterred by these draconian cuts. The subcommittee recognizes and appreciates the importance of your work. I wanted to say before we recognize Mr. Simpson that regarding the schedule of our hearing, we anticipate having votes at about 3:45. I would encourage everyone, including our witnesses, to be as brief as possible. I'll now turn to our ranking member, Mr. Simpson, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capto. I'd like to join you in welcoming our witnesses. We appreciate your being here today to discuss the fiscal year 2021 budget request for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Civil Works Program, the Department of Interior's Central Utah Project, and the Bureau of Reclamation. General Semih Knight, I understand that this is likely your last hearing before this committee. Whether you like it or not, I'm not sure. You brought great energy to your term as Chief of Engineers. Thank you for your service to the Corps and to the nation. The budget requests for these water resource programs, once again, include sizable reductions from enacted levels. 32% for the Bureau of Reclamation and the Central Utah Project, 22% for the Corps of Engineers. Reductions are no surprise. It happens almost every year, regardless of who is in the White House and who's in charge of Congress. The only surprising thing to me is that the reductions for the Corps was not even larger. When you move the funding request for FUSRAP back to the Corps, which Congress is likely to do, the budget request totals $6.1 billion. That is not just the highest budget request in many years. It is more than $1 billion higher than all but one budget request in the last 20 years. Unfortunately, I continue to have concerns about the project-specific allocation process, especially when it comes to the annual work plan. Over the past several years, we have seen continued disregard for congressional direction, which is incorporated into law. We have seen encouragement of allowing non-federal sponsors to buy their way to the front of the line for federal funding, and we have seen funding categories ignored. I think I know how these problems are finding their way into the work plan process, but to make sure, I'll have some questions on these issues at the appropriate time. The infrastructure investments carried out by the Corps and the Bureau of Reclamation are critical to improving our national economy, public health and safety, and the environment. I think Congresswoman Capter said last year that this is the biggest infrastructure bill we have. We all talk about infrastructure, but this is the biggest infrastructure bill that we have. I'm confident that once again, this committee will work together to provide strong support for these programs. Thank you, Chairwoman Capter, for calling this hearing. I look forward to discussion with our witnesses.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Simpson. We'll now turn to the Ranking Member of the full committee, Kay Granger of Texas. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you, Chairman Capter and Ranking Member Simpson, for holding the hearing today on fiscal year 20. Would you take care of me again, please? Can we start this over? You always take care of me very well. I'm really appreciative. All right. I won't start over. The Civil Works Program of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Department of Interior's Bureau of Reclamation and Central Utah Project. I want to say particularly to Lieutenant Governor Semih Knight, enjoyed our trip. It was very helpful. We went on the border and saw what's happening there, and it was a short trip, but very, very helpful. Thank you. And the Honorable R.D. James, where we've worked together such a long time on projects that are close to what I'm doing in Congress, but it's really my district, and thank you for all the work you've done. I'd also like to thank our witnesses for being here today. Your agencies are the nation's foremost experts on water resources, development, and management issues, and we all appreciate the important work that you do. Your efforts support our economy, protect public health and safety, improve the environment, and generate clean, renewable hydroelectric power for communities across the country. The Corps of Engineers also carries out significant construction work for other federal agencies. I've had the opportunity to see firsthand the work the Corps is doing on behalf of U.S. Customs and Border as we went on our trip, and that was very helpful. I've witnessed many construction projects over the year, and I know how difficult the work is. I commend your team for doing really a quality job on such a complex project. Unfortunately, the executive branch has consistently proposed reductions for the important programs we're discussing today. Although the budget request for the Corps of Engineers is the highest request in many years, that request and the request for the Bureau of Reclamation are significant reductions from current levels. I wish everyone who did that could see what I see, and those of us who are on this subcommittee, and how important your work is. So thank you very much for your testimony, and I'm glad to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Granger. Now let us proceed. First, we will hear from the Honorable R.D. James, Assistant Secretary, I should say outstanding Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works. Mr. James serves as the 12th Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works and previously served on the Mississippi River Commission, and he is no stranger to the Corps. Next, we will have Lieutenant General Todd T. Semih Knight, the 54th Chief of Engineers, also outstanding. Lieutenant General Semih Knight assumed his current position on May 19, 2016. As I stated in my opening remarks, General Semih Knight's term in this role will end this May. Again, thank you for your leadership, General Semih Knight, always with a smile. Following that, Assistant Secretary Timothy Petty, the Assistant Secretary for Water and Science at the Department of Interior. Previously, Assistant Secretary Petty served as Acting Assistant Secretary and Deputy Assistant Secretary for Water and Science at the Department of Interior under President George W. Bush. And last but not least, we have the Commissioner Brenda Berman from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. Commissioner Berman is the 23rd Commissioner for the Bureau of Reclamation and the first woman to lead reclamation. Hooray. Thank you all for taking the time to be here today. Without objection, your written statements will be entered into the record. Please feel free to summarize your remarks in about 3 minutes, starting with Assistant Secretary James.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me here today to testify, and thank you for your time to listen to me. I do have a written testimony here. It's the same as I will turn in for the record, so under your timeline, I think I will just forego reading it unless you want me to.
Please proceed.
Okay. There's a few things I would bring up. The Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, has become very, very interested in the inland waterway system of this country and the needs of the inland waterway system of this country as it relates to agriculture, of course, from his steelhouse. He and I'm working on a plan with him to make the needs of inland waterway known around this country. We rolled out in St. Louis, Missouri last fall, and we intend to be speaking at other areas around the country as we go forward. Of course, agriculture isn't the only thing that uses the inland waterway system, but that is Secretary Perdue's focus is on the needs of agriculture and how the inland waterway system helps agriculture. The other thing that I would mention is that the CEQ, Council on Environmental Quality, is, as we speak, looking over the NEPA process, which is somewhere around 40 years old now, and the feeling, and I share that feeling actually, that needs to be refreshed and looked at and seen if we can update that in any way to make it better for the people that we all serve. And also, I think, discover places where we might be able to save money and get more dirt moved for the dollar. That's what I'm hoping on that. The other thing that I would mention to you that you may or may not know about is the water subcabinet. The water subcabinet is made up of all the major agencies, including Commerce, Interior, EPA, Agriculture, who I forgot? Department of Energy, Civil Works, Army Civil Works. Now, why do we need another bureaucratic agency in this town? Well, that's what I thought when this started. It really was. I've been to several of their meetings. I feel completely different. It's going to let us, as a U.S. government, look at the same problems from different perspectives and come out with one idea. That's the hope. That's what we're trying to do. We've had a couple of examples of that already, and it seems to be working fine. And I'm proud to be a member of that subcabinet. The other thing that bothers me personally is the fact of the benefit cost ratios that we're discovering through our core processes of studies and feasibility studies and the PED part of the study. And I can't believe that some of our projects' benefit cost ratios are as low as they are. I don't feel like we are discovering all the benefits of a project in our processes the way that we're doing them right now. I will be looking into that with General Semih Knight and/or his replacement as the summer goes along. And we're not trying to bamboozle anybody, but if there's a flood control project, we want to make sure it gets the benefits, its regional benefits, plus its national economic benefits. And I don't think we're doing that. I don't think we're deep diving into what are the benefits. Same way with our locks and dams. I don't think we're deep diving into that. We're just doing the NED benefits. That's like skimming the surface. So I will be working on that as the summer goes along as well. With that, I'll stop. I used my whole 5 minutes anyway.
Thank you, Secretary James, for your fine service. General Semih Knight, please begin.
Chairwoman Capter, Ranking Member Simpson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm pleased to be here with Secretary James and appreciate his leadership of the Army Civil Works team as we continue to work together to address water resources and infrastructure challenges across the great nation. I've been in command of the Corps for nearly 4 years, and I've challenged the enterprise to revolutionize the way we do business. This does not imply that the Corps is not a world-class organization. Rather, it demands that we anticipate and respond to changing requirements and externalities like all world-class organizations. Successful Civil Works project delivery supports the nation's current and future energy and water infrastructure priorities. The Corps' credibility is measured by our ability to deliver results that are on time, on budget, and of exceptional quality. To that end, the Corps has been taking bold actions to improve performance to continue to engineer solutions for the nation's toughest challenges. We're able to do this because we have a world-class workforce of talented and dedicated professionals who are absolutely passionate about what we do. However, none of our work is done alone. It is done in full participation and collaboration with many others like yourselves. We appreciate the appropriations provided by this committee to focus on current mission areas and serve as a guide to implement the Civil Works program with a strategic vision, taking pioneering steps to remain relevant and ready for the challenges of tomorrow. The FY21 Civil Works budget is performance-based, focused on reducing flood risk in communities across the nation, facilitating commercial navigation, restoring aquatic ecosystems, and generating low-cost renewable hydropower. Our targeted approach allows us to invest $5.966 billion in discretionary funds towards commercial navigation, flood and storm damage reduction, and aquatic ecosystem restoration, all of which benefit the nation's economy, the environment, and public safety, now and in the future. I'd like to focus my remarks on a couple of significant programs and projects in this year's budget. The FY21 budget provides $102.6 million in the investigations account to evaluate and design projects within the Corps' 3 main mission areas and for related work, including research and development. $2.265 billion of the FY21 budget will be used for the construction program to produce as much value as possible for our nation from the available funds. Funding is also prioritized for mitigation work at ongoing construction projects and work needed to comply with biological opinions and with treaties. The Corps continues to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of its operation and maintenance program. The budget focuses on investments that address infrastructure maintenance needs on a risk-informed basis. The budget also provides a total of $3.123 billion for the operations and maintenance programming, including $158.8 million in the Mississippi River and tributaries account and $967.9 million in the harbor maintenance account. We appreciate, value, and depend upon the support of the administration, the Congress, and all of our partners to succeed in our mission. I'm very proud of the work that the Corps accomplishes, and I'm equally aware that the organizations can and will improve. I have been and remain committed to instituting lasting changes to the Corps' delivery process in order to become a more efficient and effective organization. We process more than 80,000 permits annually for the regulatory program to effectively protect and preserve water-related resources of this nation. We need to be optimally funded at $210 million. The Corps strives to be value-added to deliver solutions as the nation's engineers. We cannot conduct these reforms in isolation. We need the help of OMB and Congress to unleash the power of the Corps by acting on our numerous work plan and budget recommendations. For more than 244 years, the Corps has adapted to meet the challenges of the day. Today is no exception. Our current efforts to revolutionize the Corps simply represent the next chapter in this remarkable journey. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of this committee. I appreciate all the comments you said at the beginning about my tenure, and it's, after 41 years, it's the pride of my life to be able to be in this job, and I really, really appreciate the support of this committee and this Congress in helping us do our job. Thank you.
Thank you, General, and for the millions of miles you've traveled in our country and abroad. Thank you very, very much. Assistant Secretary Petty, please begin.
Yeah, thank you, Chairwoman Capter, Ranking Member Simpson, the rest of the committee members. It's a pleasure to be here today and to discuss with you the President's fiscal budget of 2021. both at Department of Interior and the Bureau of Reclamation, and the Central Utah Projects Completion Act, also referred to as CUPCA. I greatly appreciate your ongoing support of our programs. I am also pleased to join the Commissioner here today, and I thank her for her leadership that has been just outstanding in the work of reclamation. Overall, the Department of the Interior's complete 21 budget request is $12.8 billion in current funding. So much of that work is just built into the use of sustainability and natural resources. Reliable water supply and energy security of our discussion here today is critical in supporting the economic prosperity of communities in the West. The Bureau of Reclamation's operations, including recreational support of over $63 billion in economic activity and over 450,000 jobs each year that Reclamation supports. Reclamation's annual average of roughly 40 billion kilowatt hours of electricity provides for more than $1 billion in gross power revenues for the federal government. The 2021 budget supports our efforts to address the challenges that impact the availability and reliability of water supply. This budget also furthers Interior's commitment to working with Indian tribes toward tribal prosperity. Across Interior, the budget includes $156 million for Indian settlements commitment. Of that, $112.1 million in Reclamation's efforts toward fulfilling those responsibilities. Our nation's water resource challenges will only be addressed through cooperative efforts. Assistant Secretary James referenced earlier the importance of that collaboration, and I continue to engage on so many of his counterparts and other agencies with water-related responsibilities. Our cross-cut efforts increase coordination, which focuses resources, which reduces duplication across the federal government. We recognize that work collaboratively, we can better support work that is underway to address the water challenges in areas of drought, water quality, water reuse, weather forecasting, just to name a few items. Finally, Interior's budget, as mentioned earlier, request includes the CUPCA program and CUPCA office. This falls under the jurisdiction of the Assistant Secretary. In 21 budget, the office is allocating $10 million for the continual planning, construction, oversight activities of all of these efforts being completed in the state of Utah. In conclusion, I'd like to submit all my work and records here. And again, thank you so much for all the effort and support that you give to Department of Interior.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, very much. And now we'll hear from Commissioner Berman. Please begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capter, Ranking Member Simpson, members of the subcommittee, for the opportunity to discuss today the President's budget for the Bureau of Reclamation. I'm Brenda Berman. This is my third year testifying in front of you as the Commissioner of Reclamation. But before I begin, I'd like to thank the committee for your hard work and support in providing funding for our projects in fiscal year 2020. Having full funding has made a profound difference in Reclamation's ability to fulfill our mission with the resources Congress intended for that purpose. And of course, we're grateful as well for the appropriation of both wind funding as well as additional funds for the priorities we share with you, particularly rural water, water conservation and delivery, and Water Smart and Title 16. In this hearing, it's my goal to testify to the strength and purpose of Reclamation's fiscal year 2021 budget, a budget which continues to address water supply challenges in the West. Our goal remains to ensure water reliability and the efficient generation of energy, our mission, to celebrate America's recreational opportunities, and to uphold the commitments to tribal nations and the environment. The 2021 budget prioritizes these functions and fully supports Reclamation's vital role out West. I just wanted to take an opportunity to talk a little bit about hydrology. And you have some slides in front of you and up on the wall. And this is where Reclamation works. This is the background in which we work. And in 2020, I just wanted to give you a little bit of idea of what's going on in the West. If we could go to the hydrology slide. And so when you look at the West this year, and Chairwoman Capter, you mentioned some of this, we see that in many places we're running about average on hydrology. If you look up in the Missouri Basin, we have full reservoirs from a very wet year last year, and we believe we're going to be able to meet our responsibilities to water users in the Missouri Basin. But as you move across, up into the Pacific Northwest. I think you'll see that we are running, again, about average, and that's a good thing. So let's look at the Colorado River region. So if you look at the upper and lower Colorado region, it started off fairly wet, and it's been trending towards drier, though it's supposed to rain the next 3 days in Arizona. But we believe that we are on target to meet all of our responsibilities in the Colorado River Basin, given the hydrology this year. But now if we look to the Klamath in southern Oregon, I think you'll see that they are significantly below average for their hydrology this year. And it's still early. It's March. A lot could happen between now, March, and April. Even May, we get storms. Last year we did. But this year, it's looking like it might be very difficult for the Klamath Basin. And if you look further south into California, you'll see that they are significantly below average. It is a very dry year in California to date. Again, we hope that will turn around. But this informs. This is what Reclamation does. This is our responsibility, that we can deliver water in a wet year, but also in a dry year. The next slide, I just wanted to give you all an idea of what happens to the appropriations you send to the Bureau of Reclamation. So this slide just gives an opportunity to look at geographically where so many of our different projects are going on. These are construction projects across the West. And I want you to know that when this committee and Congress moves forward with appropriations, we are putting your funding to work. This is on-the-ground work that is making water more reliable, is making the Western grid more reliable, and is bringing hydropower to your local communities. So in keeping that as a background, I'd just like to highlight for a moment a little bit of our budget as we move forward with fiscal year 2021 recommendation. In the upper basin, the upper Colorado basin, we are continually seeking to implement what I call mutually beneficial tribal settlements. They avoid expensive and contentious litigation, and they're good not only for tribal nations, but also for their neighbors. In fiscal year 2021, we are requesting funding for the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project and for the Amit litigation settlement, as well as others. In the lower Colorado Basin, home to Hoover Dam, home to Representatives Calvert and Kirkpatrick, our priority remains to continue to address the 20-year drought on the Colorado River Basin, using all of our authorities. In the California Great Basin, you can see they will have many challenges this year, and we will be moving forward with partners with those in the basin to move forward to make sure that water can be as reliable as possible. And we have so many other projects across our different regions, and I will just conclude by saying thank you to the committee. I'm prepared to answer questions. We're very proud of the work we're doing across the West. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Berman, very much. And I thank the Bureau for providing maps that members can understand. With an average seniority level in the Congress now of 6 years or less, we have a lot of education to do. And so we thank you for this and for making us able to speak with our colleagues in a more coherent manner. If you were up here at the dais, you'll see how many people, how many members have the map at the top of their stack. So that was very, very, very good, and we thank you for that. Thank you all for your statements, and as a reminder for those members present in the room when I gavelled in at the beginning of the hearing, I'll recognize you for questions in order of seniority, alternating between majority and minority, until all who arrive prior to the gavel have asked questions. For those who arrive after the hearing has started, I'll recognize those members solely in order of arrival, again alternating between majority and minority. And lastly, I intend to observe the 5-minute rule for questions and answers, and we'll begin questioning under our normal rules. And the first one deals with Brandon Road. And I wanted to ask Secretary James, the Brandon Road Asian carp barrier, President Trump went back on his word. And since then, Michigan and Illinois are taking a new approach in their efforts to temporarily fund the project with state dollars. Mr. Secretary, it's my understanding that there are 2 agreements heading to your desk to allow the work to start. Expedited review is essential to ensure the project can proceed during this fiscal year. will you commit to ensure expedited review of these proposals? And secondly, we all know that the OMB reviews your work plan and oftentimes overrules your policy and engineering expertise. In your opinion, is the final work plan reflective of the Corps' recommendations based on technical and engineering expertise?
There is an agreement in the division office right now, MVD. It will be coming up to my office very shortly. I understand that Illinois and Michigan did agree to pay $8 million toward this study, which is the PED study, the pre-engineering, engineering and design, at a cost share of 65-35. It's also my understanding that for the actual construction, I think Illinois is leading the way, trying to get other states to buy into the project and actually cost share some of the construction of the project. What was the other? Oh, you want to know about the funding?
Will you commit to ensure expedited review of these proposals?
Absolutely. When they reach my office, they are expedited. They have to go through administration review, and then I get them back for submission to the Congress. And but we expedite them. I made it a point when I got here and found out that there were still guidance documents from laws you all had passed in 2014 and 2016. It upset me, and we're expediting everything.
All right, I thank you very much. And is the final work plan that will be put forward reflective of the Corps' recommendations based on technical and engineering expertise? We know that OMB often changes things around, and so therefore, can you affirm that the final work plan is reflective of the Corps' recommendations?
As it leaves my office, it is.
Thank you very much. I will reassume my remaining time at a different moment. I would now like to call upon Ranking Member Granger.
As I said earlier, we visited the southwest border several times to view the security enhancements. Some call a fence, some call it a wall. I called a fence by mistake, and the president took objection to that, so I call it a wall now. It's what y'all call it now. I saw that there's a change in the problems. Sometimes water problems, sometimes rock problems. It's very difficult to do this and have construction along the Rio Grande where there's miles of border. How do you adjust from one type of issue physically to another? And also there's a plan for 450 miles of border fencing to be completed by the end of the year. And will you be able to reach that goal?
So, ma'am, there's several different types of terrain and different types of environmental factors down there. So what we do is we've been asked to build this within 3 feet of the border. So therefore, the location is relatively fixed. But we work for Customs and Border Patrol. They have very, very stringent guidelines that we must follow when it comes to taking care of Native American burial grounds, when it takes to the environment, water, all the rest. So we actually do what's called a design build. We give the contractor the start and the end. We have them actually do the design. A good example, if there's water that's going to flow through, there's certain structures that have to be able to let that water go underneath and let the debris not get caught up in it. So every section of it, although this is a standard design, it is hand-tailored to be able to make sure that it is best applicable to either go up the slopes or be able to take care of those environmental factors. Where we're very worried about the habitat, there's certain areas where we've got to be able to make sure a habitat can go through it within the confines of still trying to achieve what the administration and the CBP is trying to do. And we can certainly go in more details, but there's no one-size-fits-all. It's handcrafted to be able to make sure we're balancing all those competing demands.
And the other part of the question, there's a plan for 450 miles of border fencing completed by the end of the year? Can we get a
We are
breakdown?
very aggressive. That is our plan. We think we'll still be there. I'd like to think we can even beat that. But on the other hand, there are times litigation kicks in. And if we have the litigation, then unfortunately that will impact the schedule. But our goal is to be exceptionally aggressive and to do everything we can to get to the 450 number.
Thank you very much. That's all.
Ranking Member Simpson.
I deal to Congressman Calvert. He has a defense hearing.
I appreciate that. When you mentioned the, General, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And I know the President's probably been calling you weekly about the border wall and how much progress you're making. But I'm just curious, on that 450 miles, is that billed or obligated?
Sir, that is actually what we expect to have in the ground by the end of the calendar year of 2020. So there's other money that has been obligated that will go into 21 and even some into 22. But the 450, that's all obligated and will be built.
Is this the money that was displaced out of the defense budget to go into the wall? Is that what you're going to obligate?
Sir, there are a combination of three types of money. Part of it is the regular normal congressional appropriation the CBP gets. There's another portion, which the Secretary of Defense, which is called 284 money. And then there's a third portion, which is called 2808 money. So it is a combination of three different types of money.
Okay. I want to be careful how I say these things because I don't want the money that's in Marietta Creek to end up somewhere else. With that, I'll move on to Marietta Creek. Secretary James, General, thank you for both being here. I want to talk about Marietta Creek. I've talked to you both about it many times over the years, and we're, wanting to get this project completed. We've been working closely with Colonel Barta at the LA office, and as you know, we're trying to contain costs and available resources that we use it effectively to get this thing completed. The sponsor, Riverside County Flood Control, and the Water Conservation District has requested a Section 221 in-kind contribution for credit agreement to allow the sponsor to design phases 2B and 3 of the project. They believe the Section 221 agreement would accelerate remaining design work and reduce total project costs. The sponsor has also asked to work closely with the Corps to update the economic side-by-side study of the project. So how are we doing on that, and what do you expect?
Sir, we have a very high standard in the Corps for making sure we're collaborative and we communicate. We missed it on this one. I want to look in the eye and tell you that. The district let me down on this. And so as a result, we're doing four things. Matter of fact, Mr. Al Lee right here is my new Director of Civil Works. He's been on the phone the last couple of days making sure we get this to where it needs to be. Four things. Number one, we're going to complete the we're going to turn the work over to Riverside County by 30 June of this year, and phase 2 will be 21 January of 21. Number two, we're going to suspend the work on the GRR, and instead we're going to do exactly what you asked, Section 221, to be able to let the non-federal sponsor go ahead and do that design work on their own. Number three is we're going to do better partnering. That's always been a goal, but again, on this one, we didn't do what we needed to do to make sure that you were informed. We even were late answering a letter to you that we should have been much, much more responsive on. And then the fourth one is I've asked Mr. Lee to be able to do a bi-weekly update. So this district now is not just reporting to the division, they're coming into the headquarters to make sure that we personally track them. We've got we're doing $66 billion of work this year, but those that are not where we need to be get an extra special little bit of love, and this one's going to get some extra love.
Well, God bless you. We need all the love we can get. So thank you for focusing on that. I appreciate that. The main stem project, any comment on the Santa Ana main stem, how we're going to be allocating the supplemental funds, specifically what's in the plan to address the outstanding $161 million for the new official cost estimate?
So as you're aware, we've got $17.4 billion in the supplemental. This one is a supplemental project. There is some additional growth to this particular project due to some design issues. We have to go figure out where can we do some reallocations. We've got a proposal right now to go to Mr. James and to be able to get his approval to be able to put some additional money. There's a couple projects that we think we've got a little bit of float on, but we need to go back in and let Mr. James approve that. Our goal is to come in and do the majority of what we were going to do in Santa Ana, but you've got my commitment. This is a very, very important project, and we've got to get Santa Ana done. The question is, we're a little bit shy, but we think through the depth of the program, we'll be able to cover it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Congressman Kilmer.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks for being with us. I'm not sure if I should direct this to Assistant Secretary James or General. Coastal communities throughout my district are really struggling with growing threats of coastal erosion and with rising sea levels. I'm very grateful that your budget includes $77 million for flood control and for coastal emergencies. And I'm particularly grateful for the countless times the Seattle district has rapidly deployed resources to shore up failing jetties or seawalls to prevent a major disaster from occurring, and appreciate them not putting a restraining order out against me and my staff for the number of times that we've called. I recognize those activities come with a significant price tag, and I keep coming to the thought that we're missing an opportunity to make smart investments on the front end in resilience rather than waiting until these structures fail. So in comparison to the $77 million that's requested to respond to these emergencies after they happen, your budget includes $5 million provide for planning and technical assistance to local communities that are trying to reduce their risk of a major flood or coastal hazard event. And additionally, the Corps has no dedicated resources to help communities that are actually trying to execute what are often small-scale resilience projects that could yield a lot of benefit on the downside. So I was hoping you could talk about the opportunities you see for the Corps to take a more active role in supporting communities who want to invest on the front end in resilience before a disaster occurs, and what resources and authorities you already have to support that work, and what you might need from Congress to better support that type of work.
Hey, sir, you're exactly right. The more that we can be proactive up front just pays unbelievable dividends down the road. So this is mainly through planning assistance to states. That's a great program, and a little bit of investment with really a lot of times a relatively small amount of money can have unbelievable capabilities. The challenge is when you look at the total pot of money, unfortunately there's so many must funds, things like making locks of dams work and some of the projects, that is one of the accounts that is a little bit light. Anything that Congress could do to give us more money in that particular area, even if it's fenced or dedicated, then we're going to be able to turn that right around, and we will make sure and we will commit to be able to put that where the best return on investment for Congress will be. We aren't going to do all of them, but where we see good ones, like the ones you're mentioning, I think there's great merit in doing that.
From an authority standpoint, do you have what you need?
I think we do, but I'll tell you what, I'll take as a tasker to double check that. And if you don't mind, I'll get back with you and say, what do we need, if there's anything on authorities, and maybe even recommend a rough order of magnitude of what do we think within the capability of what we could do so that in future years you could see if you could help us out.
I'd really value that. Assistant Secretary James, I'm also grateful that your fiscal year 2020 work plan includes $3 million for the Seattle district to proceed with the design and cost update for the downstream fish passage facility at the Howard Hansen Dam. As you know, this fish passage facility is just critical for meeting your agency's obligations under the Endangered Species Act, also really essential for recovering some of the key stocks of Chinook that'll help not just orca recovery, but both our tribal and recreational and commercial fisheries as well. It's essential that the Corps completes the design and cost update quickly so that we can keep the project on track to meet the 2030 deadline set by the biological opinion. Can you tell me when these funds will be made available to the Seattle district, and what's the anticipated timeline for completing the design and the cost update?
The funding in the fiscal year 20 work plan was $3 million, and in the for the investigations, and $4 million in President's Budget 21 for the O&M. Now, I don't think the $3 million is going to finish the investigation on that fish passage. It's going to take more funding than that.
What will it take?
I don't know. General, do you have any idea what it takes?
I don't think I have that here. No, sir.
I don't either. But like the general just said, we can get you the number of where we are looking at today to finish that study and get back to you just as quickly as possible. I don't have it. What that would be.
Yeah, sir, the main thing we need here is we're real close to a 902 limit on this. And so we've got to be able to get the report done and be able to make sure that we continue to have the bandwidth to be able to continue to invest in this. So I think that's the main thing that $3 million would do, is to get what's called the Packer done so we can have the 902 limit raised.
Thank you. I know I'm out of time. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Ranking Member Simpson?
Thank you, Chairwoman. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I'd like to try to get a little more insight into the Corps' work plan process, particularly in fiscal year 2020 work plan. General Semih Knight, as I understand it, the first draft of the work plan is developed by subject matter experts in the district, division, and headquarters offices, culminating in your recommended work plan to the Assistant Secretary. Is that correct?
It is, sir.
Can you please briefly describe how you prioritize projects for funding in your recommended work plan? What kind of quantitative and qualitative metrics do you use?
So first of all, we put a lot of effort in the work plan, and it's not something we do in 2 or 3 weeks. We spend 6 or 7 months on it. We're starting the work plan for next year right now. So every one of the requirements that we can't get funded, those go through a very, very critical analysis. And you talk about the metrics, I'm going to give you 5. Number 1, risk to public safety. Number 2, legal mandates. Number 3, national security. Number 4, economic and environmental return on investment. And number 5, we're going to finish what we start. So those are how we bin those, and we're engineers, so I hate to say we have a great big matrix, and they all kind of rack and stack accordingly. The other thing, though, is that as much as you can have great metrics, what's most important here is your gut. And so I go to the division commanders about 2 months out, and I say, I want to know your top 3 to 5 projects that you really think this nation needs to be able to invest in. And they write me a personal email. I give it to General Spellman sitting right behind me, and I say, let's get as many of these we can. Now, sometimes they might want $80 million, but their capability is only 30. But the bottom line is we go out of our way to be able to make that work plan is based on engineering and science. We don't worry about boundaries. We don't worry about politics. We're trying to do what's best for America.
Thank you. If we include districts, divisions, headquarters, approximately how many technical experts are involved in developing what becomes your recommended work plan? Would you say it's in the hundreds?
Sir, it's probably over 2,000.
Assistant Secretary James, as I understand the process, after the Chief of Engineers sends your recommended work plan to you, you have a handful of people in your office who review it as well. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Do you make any changes to what the chief recommends? And if you do, would you characterize the scope of changes as minor or significant?
Most changes I make in my office are policy-type changes. If I see something that's interfering with a policy that we need to follow, that maybe the Corps missed. But we make very few changes because my management and budget staff are in hourly contact with the chief's staff over there as they and we are developing the work plan. So there's very, very little daylight between us when I get the work plan.
Then once you have your recommended work plan, you send it on to OMB where a handful of people review it as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
General Semih Knight, was the final fiscal year 2020 work plan submitted to the committee identical to your original recommended work plan? If it was not, would you characterize the scope of changes as minor or significant?
Sir, I would say that it was not identical, and I would say that the changes are significant. And I would also say that what Mr. James said, this is not where we develop it, we send it to him, and we don't see it anymore. Every day we're talking back and forth, and there's times where I might walk in and say, we need a little bit more money here or there. And probably more than any other work plan, it has been seamless between the 2 different offices that we have provided a product that we would put our name on to say this is a good investment.
So it seems to me that we have a process that allows for a handful of people at OMB who may or may not have any engineering or construction experience to override the judgment of hundreds of people who have been hired specifically for their subject matter expertise. This is not a good situation. I believe Congress needs to do something about it, and I have several ideas I plan to discuss further with my colleagues. Additionally, I'm concerned that the fiscal year 2020 work plan is not in compliance with the direction provided in the Act. General Semih Knight, in fiscal year 2020, the 2020 Act included language providing you as the Chief of Engineers with the authority to determine which projects are eligible for funding under which categories. I assume your original work plan recommended to the Assistant Secretary was consistent with your determination and congressional direction provided in the bill and report. Is that correct?
Definitely.
Were you provided the opportunity to confirm whether or not the final work plan also was consistent with the direction in the bill and prior report to it being submitted to the committee?
No, primarily, sir, because this was done in so much flux that even up to the day that we made the announcement of the work plan, there were still being changes made that morning. We just couldn't get all of that level of fidelity.
Were you given any explanation for how you were supposed to fulfill your statutory responsibility if you weren't even given sufficient time to review the significant changes in the work plan before it was finalized and submitted to the committee?
Sir, we were not given any additional guidance, no.
Thank you. Yield back.
Congresswoman Frankel.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all of you for your service. Appreciate it. Let me just make a comment that I think, given the economic stress that this country is under, this is not a time to cut back the Army Corps budget. Other than, and I say this with probably no respect, is I don't think we should be spending money on that stupid, bigoted border wall, which I think is inane, but no comments necessary on your part. Secretary James, I know that the marine industry would agree with you on taking a look at the cost-benefit analysis, because they believe that there are a lot of issues associated with the marine industry that's not taken into account. But I have some local issues I'd rather get your comment on, unless you feel, okay. I just wanted to pass that on.
Well, my feeling on that, I didn't dream it one night. You're exactly right, Congresswoman. That's from years of dealing with people in both the inland navigation, the harbor people on the coast, and people seeking flood control in this country. We've still got people that get flooding, just like the Missouri River did last year. And those are the people that cannot get projects because their benefit cost ratio is too low to be funded.
Anyway, thank you for looking at that. I want to ask a couple questions. In terms of the Central Everglades Planning Project, Army Corps' position, do you believe that a new start is necessary for each individual project?
Yes, ma'am. Our counsel has looked at this several times, and unfortunately, that is the current position of our lawyers.
It is okay. And first of all, I want to also thank you for the additional funding that you are requesting. On the, you probably know about the controversy in Palm Beach County and Martin County concerning the lake level of Lake Okeechobee. So this year, it's my understanding that this year that you allow the lake to go 2 feet below this average, if you're following that. There is a very big fear, especially in the cities and the counties, that we're going to go to a drought. I was mayor when we had a terrible drought, and we almost lost our water. It's also a concern of the agricultural community. So I'm just, first of all, do you expect that we're going to have any drought measures? And is this going to be something that you're going to be doing every year?
We don't expect any drought, ma'am. Again, we think a couple of years ago, we probably came in too high on how much water was in the lake. Last year, we went low, mainly to be able to champion or to be able to not have the algae blooms. That worked very, very well. This year, we're going to go a little bit higher. I don't have a number, but I think you're probably aware of, we have some very, very strict protocols of how we work the lake levels. We're right in the middle of redoing that, so we have a little bit better table to be able to make sure that everybody knows what's going to happen with the lake. But we do not see a significant problem this year.
Okay, that's good. And just, Madam Chair, just to remind the committee and also the Corps that last year in our budget, we put language which encouraged the Corps to use the best available science to determine appropriate lake levels. So I would hope that we'll have that again, Madam Chair, and that you'll be doing that.
We're going to do it regardless of what the language is, ma'am. We're going to put the best science we have.
All right, and just I want to ask you in terms of find my notes here, some of our projects, whether they're on schedule, Herbert Hoover Dike.
Yes, ma'am, on schedule.
On schedule. How about the Midtown Beach renourishment? I know there's been some back and forth on that. How is that going?
I don't believe I have that one, but I'll get back with you on Midtown.
That would be great. And what about with the Everglades restoration? Can you give me an update on how the completion on that?
So overall, I think we're in very, very good place, and Congress has done a great job of investing in it in the last several years. We've seen a lot of new starts. We've seen a lot of projects being done. We continue to be able to get a very, very good investment on the money that's going back in there. So there's no specific challenges out there. The main thing we're doing is we want to be able to make sure we work the EAA reservoir, because that's a critical part of making sure that water flow goes in the Everglades. And that's back to your question about the new start.
Yes.
And then this is where that's got to have, I would think in the WRDA, it could have, some language. And then in the work plan for 21, that would be a good place to be able to put a new start in the 21 work plan.
Okay, so you're suggesting that we try to do that?
We need to get that EAA reservoir done, ma'am.
Okay. Then I want to ask you about Port Everglades, not Everglades Restoration, Port Everglades, which is a port that accepts cargo and so forth. It received a new start, thank you for that, in last year's Army Corps work plan, and $29 million to start moving the Coast Guard station. Any estimate and when the construction will start at the port and how long it's going to complete the first step, and then how much more money will be needed in the construction account for the entire project?
So this one did get a new start. That's good news. The next big thing is the project partnership agreement. We expect that to come in sometime in December, and that'll be that's good news. And then we've got to do a supplemental NEPA because we've got some ESA issues out there. That'll be done, I think, in this September. And then when it comes down to what we think the actual construction, what I'll do is I'll have my guys lay out. I've got a beautiful graphic here. We'll lay out exactly what the deliverables are. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing we're worried about is coral. You know what happened in Miami.
Yes.
So we want to make sure we do this right. And we've got a new dredging methodology. So when we dredge out Port Everglades, we don't see anywhere near the risk of the coral that has been experienced in the past.
Good, thank you, that's excellent. I yield back.
$238 million is what it's going to need at the end.
Is that total money for both state and federal, or is that the federal?
That's the federal, the balance to complete. That's what we've already spent about $29 million, so that's about the rough order of magnitude.
Then how much what portion of that is of the project?
I think that's 65%.
Thank you so much.
Congressman Newhouse.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ranking Member Simpson. First of all, welcome to all of you this afternoon. It's always a pleasure to have you in front of us. My first questions I direct toward the Army Corps. So Assistant Secretary James, Lieutenant General Semih Knight, the hardworking men and women that you have on your team at the Army Corps of Engineers, as you know, have been conducting an extensive study of the operations of the Columbia River system. I think it's been for over 3 years now. They've been doing so in conjunction with several other agencies, federal scientists, engineers, fish biologists, and experts of these agencies have been drafting a comprehensive analysis of the operations of the system and its impacts on the environment, fish and wildlife, the economy, and certainly the communities across the region. So thank you for your efforts there. Since the release of that draft EIS, I believe it was February 28th, I've been doing everything possible to encourage community members to, and regional stakeholders as well, throughout the Northwest, to engage, make sure the general public takes the opportunity that they have during this 45-day comment period to provide their input. This is an open and transparent process. The document is public and available for everyone to review, and anyone can lend their voice and offer feedback through official comment. There are a series of public comment meetings. One of them is in my district at the Kennewick Red Lion, just make sure it's on the record, on Wednesday, March 18th from 4 to 8 p.m. There'll be others throughout the Northwest. In my view, members of our community, the everyday citizen, must engage in this process because of the importance the river system has truly, the profound effects it has on the lives of every single person who lives in the Columbia Basin region. It's certainly the greater Northwest. We must hear these voices of the people that are impacted. I recently received, and I'll just hold you up so you can see from a distance, this was an email, a hard copy of an email from an environmental organization that, in my humble opinion, had the gall to fundraise off this federal review process. You don't see average community members doing that. Fundraising off of this process. You don't see everyday citizens raising money on a scientific review that will, like I said, have profound impacts on the daily lives, the livelihoods of millions of people in the region. That's why I believe the public process is so important. That's why I believe more dialogue is so important, but dialogue based on science and facts, not on political antics like this. That's why, for example, I recently invited the governor of Oregon to come to one of our world-class hydroelectric dams in central Washington to engage with scientists, to engage with experts on the facts, not on politics. I was disappointed to learn just yesterday that the governor will not be able to join me on this opportunity, but I will commit to doing everything in my power to continue to engage in a constructive dialogue with community leaders, members of the region that make decisions, while continuing to encourage the public to offer their comments. And just let me help by inserting a plug right here. Anyone can go to crso.info and provide comments. So with that long background, and thank you for engaging, allowing me to do that. Mr. Secretary, Mr. Lieutenant General, I would simply welcome you to share some of the facts on how this process has developed, share some of the background on the federal resources and effort that went into drafting this EIS, and any information that you could share about your efforts moving forward, it would be appreciated.
Sir, I'll keep it real short, but the bottom line is we want to do this right. It's a very, very complicated equation. There's a lot of different variables, and they all compete against each other. We've got a great relationship with Bureau of Rec, a lot of other key players out there, and so what we've got to do is be able to continue to go through this comment period because the time is short, and we've got to get this EIS done by the end of next year. We don't think we can extend the comment period, but we're very, very receptive to be able to make sure that everybody's telling us what those ramifications are. And then again, at the end of the day, it's about how do we balance the environment with all of the other needs like navigation, hydropower, and irrigation.
Thank you. Secretary James, any comment that you'd like to provide?
No, just for the record, though, I think this whole enterprise is for the environmental discovery for another project, right? For the 14 power dams that are supposed or proposed. And what we're talking about here today is the environmental impact statement on what will or will those dams not do to the environment. Am I not right?
Primarily, just the future operations of the Columbia Snake River system.
Yes, sir. But I'm like General Semih Knight. We're all in on getting this EIS finished. So the project, whatever the mitigation is, we can move on with it and get things going out there.
Finally, yes. Appreciate that. Yes. Appreciate your commitment to seeing this through to the end in a positive way. Thank you. With that, Madam Chair, I'm sorry I went over time. I yield back.
Congresswoman Kirkpatrick.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I thank everyone here for being before the committee. And Commissioner Berman, I especially want to thank you for meeting with me yesterday. I really appreciated your time. And so, you know, we know Arizona and the West are headed toward a drought. And I just want to ask you, what do you think the chances are that, the drought contingency plan will kick in? And what are Reclamation's plans and strategies to address the drought that we know is coming this year?
So as you know, the Colorado River is so important to Arizona and to the 7 basin states and Mexico who rely on it. We have been in a 20-year drought on the Colorado River, and that is the deepest drought that we've seen in the recorded history of the Colorado River, and one of the worst droughts that we've seen in the paleo record. But what we've done, the incredible work that was done on the drought contingency plans and the help from Congress last year to pass that legislation is really remarkable. But what happened at that same time was also last year was an above average year on the system. And we are blessed with incredible infrastructure on the Colorado River. So we were able to capture the water from that wet year, and that has been a significant help. In addition, the drought contingency plans incentivized conservation, and the basin states together were able to save almost 1 million acre-feet behind Hoover Dam last year. So that has put us in a very good position. So for 2020, there will not be a shortage on the Colorado River. We are in a place we call Tier 0 underneath the drought contingency plans, and that means there are some contributions by Arizona, by Nevada, and by Mexico. But when we look ahead to 2021, we also do not expect to see a shortage in 2021. Anything could happen if this year stays very dry. The chances would go up, but we think the chances are fairly small, in the 11 to 15% chance of a shortage next year. And they start to go up from there in 2022. They're looking more at that 11 to 15%. 2023, they go up more, 37 to 45%. But not to throw a bunch of numbers around, but I would say we are in a very good position because of conservation last year, because of incentives from the DCP that were allowed to happen, and because it was an above-average year. So we look good for this year and next year.
That's really good news. Arizona is supposed to be getting 3 days of rain this week, so we certainly welcome that. But thank you for your leadership, and we will certainly stay in touch. I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ranking Member Simpson?
Thank you, Chairwoman. I wasn't going to say anything about this, but it's always a fascinating discussion on the Columbia River Basin. I noticed y'all mentioned hydropower, irrigation, and transportation, how important those are. Nobody mentioned fish. Nobody mentioned salmon that come back to Idaho, that if in the next 15 years something isn't done, they will be extinct. There is no doubt about that. They will be extinct. So we can talk about all that, and we never talked about the 487,000 acre-feet of water that Idaho sends out of my district down to flush salmon over those dams, and the one thing they're not doing is recovering salmon, but they are keeping water in the pool so that we can irrigate in Washington. So we sometimes have a little different take on this. Representative Newhouse and I could sit here for hours and talk about this. I understand how important that is to his district. And I guess if you don't live in an area where the Olympians of salmon come back to spawn in Idaho, then you really don't care about it. The people better start looking at this seriously. And any plan we come up with, any EIS, had better recover salmon. Now they got a new plan out here. The flexible spill thing. The one thing that will not do is speed up the migration of salmon to the Pacific Ocean, which is now about twice as long as it used to be. We don't have a Columbia River anymore. We have a series of pools that fish now have to swim through. It takes them twice as long, warmer water, more predators. We're not looking at the whole picture here. We're trying to preserve what exists instead of saying, what do we want to do for the next 20 or 40 years? What do we want this to look like in 20 or 40 years? Do the people of the Pacific Northwest want to lose the salmon runs? If you do, then fine, make that determination. Well, let's quit spending $750,000 a year or $1 million a year every year now by the ratepayers of Bonneville Power to recover salmon. It's just not working. People got to get out of their niches and start looking at what we want to do in the future. That was a subject that I wasn't going to bring up, but as you can tell, I feel a little passionately about it. Assistant Secretary James and General Semih Knight, as you know, the 2008 compensatory mitigation rule established a hierarchy of mitigation with a preference for the use of wetland banks, which have established credits already in place as approved by the Corps. According to publicly available data, there is a wide disparity of the use of mitigation banks across Corps districts. Do you know what's causing that disparity, and do you agree that it would be useful to take a look at this issue to see if there are measures that would provide better consistency and adherence to the hierarchy in the rule?
I'll let General Semih Knight elaborate on that, but from my understanding, there's not enough wetland mitigation banks in our country right now, and the Corps is working on that. They're working with individuals and other public entities to raise the number. The other thing is in some areas of the country, in some Corps of Engineer district areas, the people there, for one reason or other, would rather have their mitigation in the area of the project. Not everybody wants to buy from a mitigation bank. And as we all know, once they put in a mitigation bank, you better get your wallet out because the mitigation is going to cost you.
Yeah.
And that's the reasons that I know of personally. That's not in my policy head. This is just things that I picked up over my years of service here.
Okay.
Sir, we certainly are looking at this right now. We want to continue to look at it and have a dialogue with you. Three main reasons why there's some disparity out there, and these banks are all based on every part of the country is a little bit different. First of all, what functions are needed in the watershed? What is environmentally preferable for offsetting functions lost through permitted impacts? And finally, the availability of mitigation bank credits, kind of like the Secretary said. So this goes back to it's got to be a tailored solution, and sometimes what might work in the Northwest doesn't work in the Southeast. But we're looking down through, there's some incentives we're looking at right now. We're trying to study this, and if we can find a way of doing this better, we're all in.
Thank you. Commissioner Berman, the budget request included a bit of a reduction for Indian water rights settlements overall, although some individual projects go up. What is the reason for the decreases? Is it due to the availability of mandatory funding? And at the request levels, are all the settlements on track to meet statutory deadlines?
Absolutely. Representative Simpson, Ranking Member Simpson, we absolutely are committed to our tribal obligations. And you see that in our budget. This past year, 2020, is the first year that mandatory funding through the Reclamation Settlement Fund has become available, and that's about $120 million a year. And so we've been able to put that to work this year. We announced that about a month ago, where that funding would be going for this year. So when you look at our budget for 2021, it is to meet our responsibilities, and we have many settlements that must be funded and complete by 2025. We believe we are on target. It's tough, it's difficult, but we're moving forward with those projects, and we do believe we're on target to meet our responsibilities.
Let me just ask you, the budget request reduces funding for the authorized rural water projects. Some of these projects have components benefiting tribes. How do the tribes' projects components factor into the budget request for rural water projects?
On the Rural Water Project Program, first and foremost, we meet our existing responsibilities, meaning our O&M, our operation and maintenance responsibilities. That is overwhelmingly on the tribal side. Next, we look at the different projects that need construction, and we do look at our tribal responsibilities as we move forward with that. I think you'll see from our 2020 spend plan that we were able to put significant resources provided by Congress towards all of those rural water supply projects, and they're moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Commissioner Berman, Reclamation's 2020 work plan includes $8 million for Shasta Dam being raised, despite Congress specifically not including WIN Act funding for this project. Will all fiscal year 2020 funds be used only for planning, design, and pre-construction activities, with no funds used for any construction activities? Is that correct?
That's right. The $8 million provided in the Reclamation spend plan that was sent to Congress on February 3rd for fiscal year 2020 includes $8 million for Shasta Dam to move forward, and that is under pre-construction activities. So we are completing design. We're doing the testing we need to do to know if that project is viable and can it move forward.
Thank you for that clarification. Secretary James and General Semih Knight, the Great Lakes Navigation System is just that, a system. And thankfully, that navigation system received over 10% of the entire Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund expenditures for operation and maintenance each year from 2014 through fiscal year 2019. Last year, however, the Great Lakes Navigation System saw a precipitous dip in funding, receiving only 8.9% of O&M funding. Can you walk us through the reason for that change and why the Great Lakes received just under 9% of the entire operation and maintenance funding in this fiscal year of 2020 versus 12.4% in FY19? What has changed in the Great Lakes or national landscape to warrant this reduction?
Madam Chairwoman, I would have to check that out with experts and get back to you as soon as possible. I don't have that.
All right, with all of the extra waterfall and so forth, we have docks underwater, we have a lot of seawall collapse, there's just a lot of flooding all over the Great Lakes region at 124-year high, of rainfall in the region. So I would appreciate your getting back to us as soon as you can. Thank you so much.
Madam Chairwoman, let me make sure I'm on the right study. Is that the coastal resiliency that you're talking about, or?
No, this really has to do with the allocation of the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund to different, we're a creature of that, and the significant reduction in funding was just 9% of the entire O&M funding this year versus 12.4% in FY19. So we're curious what actually happened to cause that aberration downward in a fund that has.
I'll get that to you immediately. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to both of you again, thank you so much for prioritizing the Sioux Locks. Your budget request for 21 is at a solid level. And can you please give us an update on that project and make sure that it is actually delivered on time and on budget? Are we still on track to complete the project with a total estimated cost of $922 million? And will the 2021 project request keep us on track toward that goal?
Madam Chairwoman, the answer is yes. Bottom line is you got three parts of it: upstream channel deepening, the upstream approach walls, and the new lock chamber. The work plan money of $125 million is on capability where we need to be. And then the 21 budget gives us another $123 million, so that's capability as well. And then what we'll do is we'll start construction oversight of the upstream channel deepening soon, so we can get that part going and get the other two continue to be able to get moving. So we don't see a problem with the overall total that you mentioned. We think that's right on track. And if there's ever a time where Sioux Locks gets out of balance, I will personally come see you, because this is a critical project.
Thank you very much. Secretary
And
Jones.
I feel exactly the same way. That's one of the first projects I visited when I came into this job with Sioux Locks, and when it was explained to me what a priority it is for this country, the taconite that comes out of Minnesota across the Great Lakes and through Sioux Locks. We only had one lock, no redundancy. And then the story about soldiers and anti-aircraft gun being stationed there during World War II to protect that. So it should be a national priority to get that other lock finished in operation.
Fall of '26 is when we expect to have it done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary and General. General Semih Knight, are there any core resources or workers that would otherwise work on civil works projects being directed to work on the border wall?
No, ma'am. We have a wide variety of different types of skills. There are some that work mill missions and some that work civil works, but there's also a repository of engineering and construction people. So there are times we lean on different types of skill sets to be able to do all of our different work. But right now, because you allow us to hire up whatever the workload is, I don't have a fixed manning document. We're able to hire whatever we need to be able to take care of. We're doing $8 billion for the VA right now. I love working for the VA, but build hospitals for the VA. There's nobody coming off of civil works projects because they're diverted to some other project.
Thank you for that clarification. I was greatly disappointed that your 2020 work plan did not include a new start in funding for the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study. Assistant Secretary James, why wasn't this important effort funded in the 2020 work plan? Can you clarify?
I cannot clarify, I think, to your satisfaction. I can clarify due to the fact that it was not in the top priorities of the budget. And that's, when I get those from the corps we talked to before, as I get them from the general, then they're gone over with the administration. Sometimes they're reprioritized, sometimes they're not. But then the administration's budget comes out as that.
General, would you wish to comment on that?
We continue to see unbelievable value in this study, and we will continue to be an advocate for the study wherever we can.
Thank you very much. Congresswoman Frankel.
Sure, okay, good, okay, thanks. First of all, I want to thank you all again. I really like your approach. Very common sense. Okay, let me get back to the Everglades restoration. So this is, and back to the water level, which is such a controversy in my area because what's happening, as I think you know, in parts of South Florida, they're having the green algae in the water, which is very disruptive to them. And the folks like where I live in the Palm Beach County and the cities, they're all worried about not having enough water. So it's like the people in Martin County, they don't want too much water in the lake, and then people south of them are afraid of too little in the lake. I'm sure you get that back and forth. So this question is related to that. In Order 2000, when approving the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, Congress included a provision called the Savings Clause, and this provision prohibited the Corps from changing water supply to utilities, agriculture, and other Lake Okeechobee water users when completing the restoration projects. Now, my local folks, again, in Palm Beach County, are very anxious about what's going to be the new, what you call LOSM, the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual, which I guess will guide on how high the lake should be. And they are very anxious about that, and they are requesting that there be some kind of a saving clause in this new schedule. And I would just like you to comment on that, the practicality of that, the pros, the cons.
Ma'am, I don't personally know the savings clause with respect to Okeechobee, but let me figure it out. The main thing we want to do is be very, very open and willing to, take any ideas. This study is not going to be done till 22, so we've got 2 years. We're doing a lot of outreach, and if it's something that we're legally allowed to do and it makes sense, then we'll certainly take a good, hard look at it.
Well, that's very good. Thank you for taking a look at that, because that's, sure. I'm sure that's, you might want to sit around the table with some of these folks and understand their concern. I'm sure you all do that.
Congresswoman, I can tell you're sincerely concerned about that area, the Lake Okeechobee area,
Yeah.
and I understand that. I have fished Lake Okeechobee for probably 25 years in the wintertime, before I took this job, of course. But I'm quite familiar with the area, and I'm quite familiar with what your concerns are. I will tell you this. Ecologically, we think between 12.5 foot and 15.5 foot is probably the right spot to be. And the other thing I wanted you to know is that we have ERDIC, Research and Development Centers, thank you, working on the algae and how to get rid of the algae, dissolve the algae, or whatever we can do in case we have the problem we did year before last again. I made a trip to Florida during that time just to see that, and it was distressing for everyone I ran into down there. So I want you to know we're watching it.
Okay, thank you so much. Another question sort of related. This is like it's always something. Now there is another group has, am I done? Someone's knocking at me? No, okay. Another group is concerned about the large number of the ASR, aquifer storage and recovery wells that are being proposed for the upcoming Lake Okeechobee watershed restoration project that is north of the lake. They are concerned that not enough water will be able to move south if it's stored below ground. My question, have you heard about these concerns and your response of that?
I have not. Let us blow into it and come back and let you know. I'm sure my guys on the ground probably do, but we are worried that if there's a lot of draw out of the aquifer, what you're talking about could be exactly true. So this is where we got to put that into the equation.
Okay, good. So thank you for taking that into account. And then finally, in my last 13 seconds, Secretary James, back to that cost-benefit analysis, just to remind you that OMB, that their cost analysis is almost always different than the Army Corps, and I don't know how you can figure that one out, but
Well, let me tell you, that's two different things. OMB's reasoning behind their benefit cost ratio and analysis, it is different because to authorize a project, the benefit cost ratio has to be 1.0 and above. Now, the administration's viewpoint is to appropriate money for a project, it has to be 2.5 and above. And I'm not arguing to change that. I mean, I'm not saying the administration needs to change that. What I'm saying is that the individual needs of this country, if you've got a project, whether it be navigation or flood control, we need to get all your benefits. We don't need to be just cherry picking the easy ones over the top and get to the 1.1 and quit.
got it.
We need to get up to where it's cost effective for appropriation. And we're a lot of projects, we're not doing that. I don't know, I may discover as we get further in that with the general that they are taking all the benefits. Personally, right now, I don't think so, and we're going to be looking at it.
Okay, well, that might solve that issue, but thank you very much. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Congressman Newhouse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to ask Commissioner Berman and Secretary Petty, a little bit about the Columbia Basin project. But and I wasn't going to do this, but it came up, so I want to respond a little bit. Some people probably think that Mr. Simpson and I have an ongoing conflict. It's true, there are potatoes in Idaho, but there are great potatoes in Washington as well, and I always have to remind them of that. However, the whole notion of looking at the Columbia Snake River system in a holistic manner in order to prioritize salmon is something that we're all interested in. And I want to have that conversation on how to address the many challenges that we have in that river system, even the spill of water from the Idaho dams. You know, we do. Mr. Simpson's absolutely right. We invest a ton of money into that system every year. But we've seen a lot of good results as well, and improved habitat, improved passage at the dams, the tremendous amount of work on the turbines and their efficiency and the high passage rate, survivability rate of the salmon through those. We're working on the predators issues, the forced spill thing, which the jury's still out on that as far as I can tell, but we're looking at different things in order to increase salmon survivability. All that being said, there were intentional decisions made, if you look back in history in the state of Idaho, that salmon were not welcome. So when they get through all the dams through the Columbia and the Snake River in Washington, guess what? Through much of the system, they run into a concrete barrier because spawning salmon just don't want to take a hook, and they wanted trout. So decisions were made way back in history. So I admit we've got challenges, but I think through positive conversations we can meet those challenges and come up with solutions so that the proof is that dams and salmon can coexist, and I think we're living that, and we're proving that every day. Can we do better? Absolutely, but I think we can. I think we will. But I do want to talk a little bit about the Columbia Basin project as well. But first, just start by saying, Commissioner Berman, you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job leading the Bureau, and I'm really grateful to have such an enthusiastic partner in advocating for water needs, not just in the Pacific Northwest, but all over the west of the United States. You're thoroughly engaged, you're responsive to questions that we've been bugging you with over the last few years. I appreciate that. It really does make a difference when we have somebody that on the front line that recognizes how valuable of a resource water is to all our rural communities and such a critical component to our economy, our growth, and our prosperity. So thank you. Thank you very much. We don't get to say that very often. Mr. Petty, for your efforts as well. Both of you know the Columbia Basin district, the project in my district well, particularly the importance of something that's, I think, has captured the attention of the chair of the committee, the Odessa groundwater replacement program. I've discussed it many times, and I'm pleased to have Chairman Kapter's interest in this as well. What I'd like to ask both of you today is to share with me some insights that I could bring back to my community members in my district. Something I often share with them when they come to DC, make the trip to talk about these issues, is the importance of speaking with one voice. You know, the federal government is vast. The bureaucracy is sometimes confusing even to us, right? It can be burdensome. And so I believe it's critical that when farmers or local elected officials or water advocates or community leaders come to DC, that their message be singular and unified. And I don't want to provide you the answer I'm looking for, but when we have these tremendous advocates from the Pacific Northwest come, and the partnerships between organizations like the Columbia Basin Development League, the Washington State Department of Agriculture, collaboration of the Office of Columbia River, the Regional Bureau of Reclamation offices, and so on. These partnerships and collaboration is what will move the ball forward in this important effort, at least in my humble opinion. So just like to ask you guys to share your thoughts on the importance of ensuring a unified vision amongst these many shared entities.
Yeah, let me kick that off, Congressman. Thank you so very much. And the important part of just how the Columbia plays into each of the different regions, and specifically into your region. The whole Columbia Basin and the Snake come through your district, and you know it better than anyone on all these systems that come through. But one of the key parts that I just want to highlight is the importance of the relationship between the Army Corps, Bonneville, and Reclamation and Interior as a whole. And it's the interaction that we get all the time, including the draft EIS, the Army Corps. We designated as that one federal lead so that we could work through it together. And it was the importance of, if we don't all succeed individually, kind of we all end up hanging together. And so with the Army Corps being able to be right there in the front, making sure that all the science, all the decades of work that we put in to develop these different areas, all the way down to Odessa, the need for surface water as well as subsurface water is critical, and including working with your state and the local state water districts as well. Those are all incredibly important areas. So I'll let the commissioner kind of finish off any thoughts that she has as well. But thank you.
I'd just like to draw attention to the witnesses. We have been called for votes, and we think it's a series of this first vote and then another. So Commissioner Berman, if you could briefly summarize. And we have another member who has come in and is waiting to question.
Of course. I will just agree with everything Dr. Petty said, and moving forward with the one federal decision model has been very, it's been great for all of us just to be able to talk things out and move forward. On the Odessa project, it's so important. It is designed to help rural communities in eastern Washington, and it's locally driven. The state is a partner, the district is a partner, we're a partner, we're all moving forward, and that project is, we're hoping we be delivering water this year.
The importance of having a single voice coming to DC, you would agree, is something we have to have too.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired. Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary James and General Semih Knight, thank you very much on behalf of the whole Florida delegation. We were thrilled that a new start was awarded so that we could begin the $29 million in construction funding that was needed for the FY20 work plan on the Everglades restoration. It's a long time in coming, and Secretary James, we appreciate you coming down and taking a look at what our needs were as well as at Port Everglades. We're very proud that we've come together as a delegation to pressure the President to request the kind of funding that we need for Everglades restoration, and I certainly hope the $250 million becomes the new federal funding floor, not the ceiling. As you all know, Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, or SERP, was authorized by Congress in 2000. We learned this week that the state legislature is getting ready to appropriate $100 million for their end of the bargain, getting closer to the 50-50 partnership that we have been since the beginning of the century. We have a number of the approximately 60 projects in SERP that are nearing completion, including the C-43 and C-44 reservoirs and the Picayune Strand project. We've also made great progress on non-SERP projects like the Herbert Hoover Dike restoration and Kissimmee River. So could you report on the SERP projects nearing completion? Because after so much work and of the federal and state investment, we really need to start moving to ribbon cuttings as soon as we can and celebrate the few projects that we have gotten across the finish line. So where are we in terms of the projects that are nearing completion so we can do that?
Ma'am, let me just hit a couple of highlights. So complete construction of Kissimmee River this year. Construction of C-111 South Dade this year. Complete Everglades Agricultural Area follow-up report and submit it to Secretary James in May of 20. And that's one we know that is very, very important. C-43 West Basin Storage Reservoir, that will complete in 2023. And then just the last one that's important, Indian River Lagoon, that's done in 2022. And the one that we really want to continue to keep pushing is the EAA, to be able to make sure we get that reservoir done. And that does need a new start. Congressman Frankel asked just before you came in, our lawyers do say that the way that the authorities are set, we're going to have to get a new start for that. Mm-hmm. So I encourage the committee to do it because we're all ready to go.
And I would say in the nicest way possible that we don't agree, but we've been around that block before. If the committee appropriates the full $250 million, either the Secretary or the General, that we've requested for FY21, will the Army Corps be able to spend those funds, and do you already have a plan to do so?
We don't see any problem right now on the ability to put all that in the ground. I don't have the exact plan with me, but let us come back to you and lay this out so you can see exactly what's out there. And if for some reason that's not in line with what the rest of the delegation would like, then we can certainly take a look at monitoring that or changing it.
Thank you. That would be very helpful. I'm concerned about the bureaucratic obstacles that were just referenced, about the need for new starts in projects that, overall were already authorized. So would you say that the limitation on the number of new starts, I know you just indicated the, wrapping up of these projects, but would you say that the limitation on the number of new starts would impact or delay Everglades projects in FY21?
I do think that there will be some impact with the limited number of new starts we get, yes.
Okay, well, it would be great if we could revisit the way that this is interpreted, because it really doesn't make sense to many of us. Touching on SEP and the EAA reservoir as top priorities for Everglades restoration, what is the status of SEP and the EAA? I know we're still waiting for the Corps to finish the 90-day report on EAA, and which is required by WRDA in 2018. Can you give us a little more detail? I know you touched on it, General Semih Knight. But
so, ma'am, that report will be done in May, and it's going to go to the Secretary. Then he'll hack off on it. I do believe he has to send it to OMB. The other thing we've got to do is the environmental impact statement. That closed on the 24th of February of this year. So now it really goes back to be able to get that new start. Now, the budget, 21 budget, does have $148 million in it, and that's where anything we can do to be able to free that up, we'll certainly do it. And I'm more than willing to look at different interpretations, but right now we don't think we can get past that new start decision.
Okay, and then lastly, is the Corps prepared to use all contracting tools available to implement SEP? The conditional contract clause, does that apply to provide flexibility that enables the projects to move ahead as quickly as possible? My understanding is that you're authorized in the Corps to fund annual segments of a larger contract over many years.
That's true, and we've been very aggressive in contracting over the last couple of years to really change our approach. So anything that we can do, regardless of what type of contract it is, as long as it's within the existence of the FAR, that allows us to be able to have the right tools to be able to put this stuff in the ground. Contracting, the continuing contract clause, I'm not aware there's any problems with that on SEP.
Okay, good to know. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz. I'd like to now turn to our ranking member for any final
Just a final comment. You might not understand this, but Representative Newhouse and I are really good friends. I enjoy the Hanford Reach and PNNL and what they do as much as the Idaho National Laboratory. However, we do have some differences on a couple of issues, and I just, discussing the 60 or 70-year-old history of what the Idaho Department of Fish and Game did doesn't really help us recover salmon today. And like he invited the governor of Oregon to come and look at the dams, I'd encourage him to come up and come with me in August, and we'll go look at some streams that used to have hundreds of salmon or thousands of salmon spawning in them. And if we're lucky, we might find one or two, if we're lucky. And the one thing I would say to him, everybody says we all want to recover salmon. The question is, what are they willing to do it? I mean, we can all talk about neat things. We've been talking about this for 50 years. Everything you do on the Columbia River, everything we do on the Columbia River can be done differently if we choose to do it differently. Those dams produce 3,000 megawatts of power. You could put small modular reactors or other things in there. You could produce it differently. Everything we do, we can do differently. Salmon need one thing. They need a river. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Simpson. Thank you again. This concludes this afternoon's hearing. Again, I would like to thank our witnesses for joining us today. I ask the witnesses to please ensure for hearing record purposes that questions for our record and any supporting information requested by our subcommittee be delivered in final form to us no later than 3 weeks from the time you receive them. Members who have additional questions for the record will have until the close of business Friday to provide them to our subcommittee office. This hearing is adjourned.